Let's move on, Brandon, into our meat and potatoes part of the podcast, and we are beginning our Big 12 preview for the world of college football. We did our SEC preview. You guys should go check that out. We're on the Big 12 for the next 2 weeks, and we're going to start with the bottom feeders, as I'm going to call them. We'll do the bottom 5 this week. Next week, we'll do the top 5 in the Big 12. Here's the thing I want to ask you first about Kansas. This is a team just recently fired their AD, believe they have not hired a new AD to this point. They still have the interim AD doing all the work. How that relates to the football team, I want to ask you, what do you think is going to go on with Dave Beatty, the head coach of the Jayhawks? This is a guy entering his 4th year, but he's only 3-33 in his first 3 years at the head of the Jayhawk program.
Ricky, I'll be honest with you. I don't know how David Beatty is still here. I'll just be flat out honest. And people can say, well, he's not working with a whole lot, or, he needed, his time to be able to get to this point. Well, he has won 3 games over 3 seasons. They went 1-11 last year. They are not competitive. This team is in such disarray in terms of, I think, leadership at the top. And at the very top, it's the head coach. And this is one of the things that we got into with Pat at the very beginning, touched on it just for a minute. Mm-hmm. It's culture. 18 to 22-year-olds, pretty much. If they don't feel like you're going in a direction where they're going to win, that they want to jump onto that, they don't want to be a part of that. They're not going to get behind you and buy in to your system, buy into what you're talking about, buy into your culture. And David Beatty has yet to establish that at Kansas. He hasn't done it. In 3 seasons, you've won 3 games. You have not done it. Mm-hmm. And I think that there needs to be somebody else. And yes, Kansas is always going to be the team that gets, I think, the short end of the stick, because they're in a tough area recruiting-wise, because you've got Oklahoma in the area. You've got Big Ten schools that are trying to take your guys.
Nebraska's a one
exactly.
Close.
And you're getting the leftovers. Mm-hmm. So yes, I get that it's difficult, but you need to try and bring somebody in who might be able to get some name recognition out there, mm-hmm. and steal away some of those players from the Nebraskas, from the Missouris, even from who was the other team that I said? Oklahoma's and mm-hmm. Oklahoma States and stuff like that, Kansas State's. You need to bring in somebody who's going to be able to do that. And I think that that's where this preview really starts with Kansas. It's at the top. It's at the leader of this team, and it's the head coach. And David Beatty has failed as a head coach in 3 seasons.
I'm going to be honest. Like I told Pat before we started recording, was kind of talking to us in between segments before we got off the phone with him, and he's a Jayhawk guy for football and basketball too. And one of the things that he said was, first he asked us to go light on the Jayhawks because, like you said, he said, hey, Beatty hasn't had a ton of help, but I kind of feel sorry for David Beatty a little bit because, A, you're not getting help, and in any job, you need help. Like, you're not going to be able to do the job to the best of your abilities if you're not getting some help from the higher-ups. But I see this season as David Beatty's getting fired at the end of the year. Like, I see no other outcome with him keeping his job because, A, I don't see Kansas winning a lot of games this year, and if they do, it might be 2 at the most. And the thing I look at is whatever new AD comes in, it's going to be a Josh Widmer situation that we saw at Illinois. I'm coming in, this guy ain't winning, we're getting him out, I'm getting my guy in. Because if you're going to lose games, I'm just going to get my guy in. Because my guy, I at least am going to have confidence that it's my guy and he's going to win because I handpicked him. But if he's losing, I can almost live with it. But at least I know I picked him. With you, I don't really know because I didn't pick you. The thing that also confuses me about Kansas football, the last coach. So the last coach they had with a winning record, do you want to know how long it's been since they've had a coach with a winning record at their program?
Was it 2009?
2009. ever since Mark Mangino, who was there from 02 to 09, who had a 51% win percentage. He's the last one. The other one, Turner Gill, 20.8. Charlie Weiss, 18.5. Clint Bowen, 21. He only had 8 games, but he was 12.5%. And now you have Beatty, who is an 8.3% of his games, going 3 for 33. So at the end of the year, I kind of feel sorry, like I said, for Beatty, because if you're not getting help, you're not going to be successful, especially when you play in a really tough football conference. But also, it's one of those things where new AD is going to come in. I'm assuming he's getting fired as soon as that AD steps through the door. Maybe not immediately if it happens mid-season, but by the end of the year, he will be fired, and the search will be starting next year for Kansas. Talking about their football, though, one big choice BD has to make is at quarterback. Right now, a little bit of a conversation at quarterback a little bit. Carter Stanley's one guy. Peyton Bender is another guy. You had Stanley that took a hold of the job late 2016 and then entered 17 on the right track. And then you also have Montreal Cozart, who is a transfer from Boise State. So I'm going to put you in the shoes of David Beatty. If you had to pick one of these guys to try to save your job, who is it? Because really, that's what he's doing.
It's going to be none of those guys. It's going to be their JUCO transfer, Miles Kendrick, who's coming from San Mateo. Mm-hmm. So the reason that I would say him, while he is smaller in size at 5'9", 193 pounds, he's a guy who can do it both ways. He can throw it. He's got a good, strong, accurate arm, and he's also a guy who can move the ball down the field with his legs. And that's something that neither Bender nor Stanley, I don't think, offer to the team. So that's why right away Miles Kendrick is the guy that I'm looking at. And he was actually ranked the number 12 dual threat quarterback from the junior college ranks. So that's pretty good. That's a guy who I would be comfortable leaning on to go out there and move the ball down the field for this football team, a team that has really struggled in offensive efficiency. I mean, they are the least efficient offense in a conference that to win, you need to have an efficient offense. Mm-hmm. So the reason I also like Kendrick is because he's got 3 years of eligibility remaining. He can play for a while, and that might be the way that they set this Kansas team up. If he's able to come out there and actually be really solid, they might be able to have their quarterback. And then, with a healthy Khalil Herbert in the backfield, they might have their running back. Mm-hmm. And then if they can get consistency from the receiver position, those guys to step up, they might have an offense. And that could be exciting for Kansas football.
I mean, the big thing about the offense, too, is we've talked about this with so many teams. So many teams, question mark, offensive line. And it's true for Kansas again, because if they don't have a strong offensive line, I don't care who you put at quarterback. It's not going to help you in the end, especially with the offense. If you're trying to get it out to receivers, you're trying to make running lanes for your running back. But here's the thing I think where the Kansas football program is in virtually this year. And it's going to go back to Beatty being fired at the end of the year. That's my prediction. And the reason is I'm reading here that Beatty was brought in originally because he's a great recruiter. His reputation was he is a phenomenal recruiter.
He's shown it too.
And this is another thing Pat said, a lot of parallels between Kansas football and Illinois football, a team that we just talked about in our first segment. But a guy who's brought in is a great recruiter. Although it hasn't shown up in the win column, last year they did some good things recruiting. For most of the year, they were a top 25 recruiting class. However, they ended up 62nd, I believe, in the 24/7 sports rankings, 8th in the Big 12. So for me, here's what I'm thinking this season. You had a decision to make at quarterback. That's going to help decide what your team does this year. But also, you have guys like Anthony Williams. You guys got guys like Corinne Harris who are coming in. And these are freshmen. How much are you going to put on this recruiting class, especially the freshmen, to come in and produce this year, are they going to have a little extra pressure because it turns into, if we don't win some more games, I am going to get fired and I won't be able to then recruit that next class and build off of it? Will it be a kind of little too late scenario of like, man, if this class just came in last year and they were sophomores this year, then it would have been a real different situation in Beaty's head going forward that, hey, these guys were just too young and I couldn't put that much pressure on them in the football program.
Maybe, but let me tell you, this is, and as much flack that I gave Beatty at the beginning, he deserves it. He's been terrible. But this is probably the best team that he's going to be working with right now because it's the most experienced team all around the football. I think they had maybe 9 total returning starters last year. They were playing with 9, not even 9 starters. They were playing with 9 returners last year, with 2 of them being starters. This year, they're returning with many more. They've got a lot. I think they've got a lot more depth than they've seen in years past, and that's going to be something that's going to help them. They've got a defense that I think has shown some improvement. But for me, for this team to click it all, defense is always going to be, and I'm going to say this multiple times, so please don't get mad at me throughout all of the videos.
It's an afterthought.
It's a bend but don't break with all the defenses. Bend. Oh, almost there. Oh, we didn't break, though.
You're talking just in the Big 12 conference.
Just in the Big 12. That is the way that defense, whether or not they want to play it that way, that's what ends up happening. If you can have a lively offense, you can win some games in the Big 12. You can win some games. You can hang with some teams. So for me, the biggest thing is coming down to something that we already touched on, and it's the offensive line. When you have 10 different guys start on the offensive line at least one time throughout the year with different combinations, that is difficult. That is very hard to get any consistency. They give up 29 sacks last season. That's also difficult for a quarterback to feel comfortable back there, whoever it is. Offensive line is going to be the key to a successful season, and a successful season may only be 5 wins for Kansas, but a successful season... What?
They're not even going to get there, I'm telling you.
I know, but I'm trying to be hopeful. I'm trying to be hopeful for Kansas and for Pat.
For audio listeners, they can't see, but I see 2 wins on this schedule. I'll be completely honest. I see 2, and I'm trying to see more. I see Nicholls State at 1. I see maybe
2, and I'm trying to see more.
Like, I'm trying in my head to be like, ooh, maybe they can beat this Big 12 team, and then I go, no, they can't. So this is what I think for the season. They're going to get 1 win for sure. They'll beat Nicholls State. If you lose to Nicholls State, pack it in. The year's over. Just lose every game. But then there's their 3rd game when they play Rutgers. I don't think you'll beat the Chippewas at Central Michigan, that game on the road. They beat you at home last year. I don't think you're going to their place and beating them. Rutgers is the interesting one. Maybe you can steal a win at home against the Rutgers program that isn't that
They're not good.
Much better.
They're not good.
So maybe that's a game you could steal. The rest of the Big 12, you pretty much got blown out in most conference games except for 1 in the final scorecard, and that was Kansas State. The thing I'm attributing that to, it was a home game. Looking at your home games in conference, Oklahoma State. Yeah, I know they lost 2 of their biggest weapons in James Washington and Mason Rudolph. You ain't going to beat them. Then the next home game in conference, TCU. Have you heard of Gary Patterson? You're not going to beat them. Then there's the key one. The last one's Texas. You're not going to beat them. Texas is going to be one of the top teams this year in the Big 12, I think. The Iowa State one. If there's any game in the conference that they could potentially steal, it's that home game on November 3rd. However, I don't see it. 2 wins at most, 1 to 2 wins. If you finish with 0, then Beatty doesn't even deserve to have a job. You got to finish with at least 1, 2 if you're really lucky, and that's all I'm seeing for the Jayhawks this year.
I still think though, if we're being very realistic, of 2, maybe 3. I still don't see Beatty keeping his job.
No.
And while, yes, this may be the deepest roster he's had to work with. It may be the most experienced roster he's had to work with. You know, we're gonna see what happens here. But this again, they're not settled on the offensive line again, like we mentioned. Khalil Herbert is very good when he's given the football. And when he's healthy. I mean, he struggled with injuries last year. He's got to stay healthy. He has got to stay healthy. But also, too, is Beatty wants to throw the ball all the time. And hopefully he now has a guy in Miles Kendrick who can be consistent in doing that, because he's got Meacham as his offensive coordinator, a guy who likes to be able to get crafty and be able to air the ball out and throw it down the field. But you know, you also have to go to kind of what your strengths are, and hopefully that will be able to be one of them this season. And then again, I know on the defensive side of the football, there's got to be an upgrade from where they were last year. I mean, they just got torched. I mean, it was like a fun thing for them to do. They go out and let's get torched again today, guys. All right, we will. And they never disappointed. But I think that's something that also has to be a little bit better. Kansas football. And guys, I'm sorry. I'm talking to you right now. Kansas Jayhawk football fans. Maybe the best thing you did last year was get inside Baker Mayfield's head, and then a win. You know, it was like get inside get inside of Baker's head.
I forgot about that.
And then a win. Like that was better than your win. But what do you think? And I know we're not necessarily turning it on to you yet. I'm not sure. But what has to happen? What has to happen to get back to Kansas football being good? What has to happen to get back to 2009? What has to happen to get back to what do you want? What do you want to see? Because I don't even know. I personally, I don't even know. I look at this and you don't have much to work with. You've won 3 games in the last 3 seasons. How do you stay a fan? I mean, it's hard. I just want to know, because it is. Kansas football is one of the most difficult programs to look at in terms of Power 5. And it's very frustrating because you like to think that things change. You go out and you recruit different guys and you try and recruit better and you get the same result every year, and it's really hard to watch.
Here's the thing this is my closing thing for Kansas, is when it comes to the Big 12, how you win in the Big 12 is you have the best offense. Whoever has the best offense is going to win. Look at last year. Last year, there was kind of an enigma to it, but the best offense won the conference. Oklahoma had the most yards out of any football team in D1 last year. They finished in first. Now, the second place team in TCU, they were third in the Big 12, I believe. Let me do a little bit of due diligence. No, they were actually fifth in the conference. However, their game against number 2, who finished number 3 in Oklahoma State, that was a very close game between Oklahoma State and them, where they got the win. I believe that game was in Stillwater that the Horned Frogs got that win. But all 3 of those programs, the Cowboys, the Horned Frogs, the Sooners, all had solid quarterbacks last year running their offenses. Plus TCU, they're a very well-coached team, and Gary Patterson does have a little bit of a defensive mind back there for TCU. I just feel like Kansas is in another season where it's just a little bit too late, and because of the circumstances with the AD getting fired, Beatty is going to be out of a job because someone's going to come in and go, whoa, 5 wins in 4 years? Sorry, not sorry, buddy. You got to pack your bags and go. And Beatty will be looking for a new job in college football next year. But this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you think down below in the comment section, what you think about Kansas football. What do you think about Dave Beatty? What are the Jayhawks going to do this year? Let us know what you think down below in that comment section.